I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, French citizens overwhelmingly agree in their vote for French president. Hunger strike leader and convicted terrorist Marwan Barghouti gets into trouble, and German President Steinmeier meets with Israeli leaders in the Holy Land. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Last night, Israeli paramilitary police officers shot dead a teenage Palestinian girl after she attempted to carry out a stabbing attack by the entrance to Jerusalem's Old City. Police spokeswoman Luba Samri said they recovered a knife along with a farewell letter from the girl dedicated to her family, quoting a verse from the Quran. The girl signed it at the end with the word Shahida, which is the Arabic word for martyr. 16-year-old Fatima Hejeji is amongst hundreds of Palestinians that have carried out sporadic street attacks against Israelis in Jerusalem and the West Bank starting in 2015. Israel blames Palestinian leadership and states they will remain to keep tight restrictions on the movement of Palestinians, especially in the West Bank checkpoints that border Israel. Parisians woke up to both fresh baguettes and a fresh-faced president this morning, as the former banker Emmanuel Macron became the country's youngest leader since Napoleon Bonaparte. Now that virtually all the votes have been counted, it's clear that Macron clobbered his opponent Marine Le Pen. The winning centrist candidate garnered at least 64% of his nation's support, while the far-right leader of the National Front Party convinced less than 34% of the public to vote for her. Here in Israel, it was even more of a slam dunk for Macron, as an overwhelming 96.3% of the dual French-Israeli citizens supported the new president. Israeli leaders are wholeheartedly congratulating Macron too, with many saying his victory over Le Pen symbolizes a triumph over anti-Semitism. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's looking forward to working with the new French president, particularly in countering the Islamic terror that plagues both nations, as well as other world democracies. Many of Macron's Mideast policies aren't really clear yet, but this past Friday he said France shouldn't grant unilateral recognition of Palestine because it would undermine stability and negatively impact French relations with Israel. After a 2015 visit to Israel while serving as his nation's economy minister, Macron said he was very impressed with the Jewish nation's startup culture and high-tech companies, and intended to utilize that inspiration back home. Finally, though he supported European Union plans to label settlement products, which is strongly rejected by Israel, he also generally opposed anti-Israel boycotts. Joining me now from the Knesset is Naftali Ben-Simon, a former journalist and Likud party member. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Now, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the French election. First of all, what does Macron mean? What does his victory mean for French-Israeli relations?
Oh, this is a very, very important signal that the French-Israeli relation will be, well, if not the same, will improve very much, because that's for sure. There is a big relief here in the Knesset, a great satisfaction from the results, and the vast majority of the members of the Knesset wanted that Emmanuel Macron will be the next president. And of course, the road of the France-Israeli relationship will improve very much. We have to remember that 2 years ago, as the Minister of Economy, Emmanuel Macron was here in Israel in a visit, and he met the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he was very impressed from what he saw. He said, this is something that we would like to have with same in France, the initiative, the entrepreneurs, the economy. And this is something that will play a great role in the next meeting between Macron, the president, and Netanyahu, prime minister.
Well, that kind of brings me into something I was thinking about. You know, if you have Macron, the president of France, who is very supportive of Israeli businesses and Israeli entrepreneurship, but at the same time, he's a proponent of labeling settlement goods, while at the same time saying he wasn't pro-BDS. So where do you think that his stance on that will be?
Well, I can tell you that in spite of all those slogans or kind of statements which made by French authorities or French Quai d'Orsay, which is the Foreign Affairs Office, about the settlements, about the BDS or something like that. The challenges that Macron face are totally different, and they are not concerning necessarily a few specific things like settlements or BDS. He wants to change the road of France. He wants to improve the economy. He wants to reduce the unemployment. He needs to bring back France to its natural place as a superpower. He needs to face the Islamic terror in France. So those are a very, very huge question, and I don't think that those kind of difficulties or nuance between France and Israel about the settlements or something like that will change. It will change its own policy. What I'm saying is that Macron was here in Israel. He's a great supporter of Israel, and he thinks and he believes that Israel, this is kind of a miracle or a wonder here in this area. And there is a lot of things that France and Israel can do together in the under Macron administration.
So I guess my last question is a two-parter for you. First, how, with Marine Le Pen's National Front Party having had such a big impact, I mean, she did win about a third of the vote, a little bit more. How does that emergence of the National Front Party reflect on France's position towards religious minorities like Jews and Muslims? That's my first part.
Yeah, nothing to do with it. Yes, it's true that Marine Le Pen got around 34%. Those are percentage from the rural part of France, the agriculture, some young frustrations, but they are not something that should inflect or change the France policy towards Israel or to Eurozone. So I believe that Macron will create a new government, and the Front National of Marine Le Pen will not have any kind of impact, in spite of this kind of, huge percentage that she got, but nothing to do with the new government, no influence. So I'm sure that Macron will get not only a great majority, but a carte blanche, as the French likes to say, to change its country and to do something that Hollande didn't do in his last 5 years. And I can tell you that Macron, like Trump, or he has so much to do that Le Pen is the minor problem of him. He needs to bring back France as a superpower in Europe and in the world.
So that actually brings me to part two of my final question, is that if Macron needs to bring, to unify France in a sense, part of that will have to be winning over that third of French citizenry that voted for Le Pen. How can he appeal to that portion of the vote, of the electorate?
Well, as you can imagine, he's, as you saw, he's young, he's talented. He has a great teacher, which is also his wife. And he's a brilliant guy. I can tell you that everyone that met him says that this is something unique that we see in the world politics. And I'm sure that he will unite all the French people, and he will do some reforms and to make the French people more satisfied and less depressed that they are in usual days.
All right. Thank you so much, Naftali Ben-Simon. Thanks for joining me.
Welcome.
Convicted terrorist Marwan Barghouti called for all Palestinians incarcerated in Israeli jails to join him in an open-ended hunger strike starting this past April 17th. But it appears now that Barghouti himself has not been honoring his own self-declared movement. Video footage of Barghouti secretly eating in his cell has been released by the Israeli prison service. He was first filmed munching on some cookies 10 days into the strike, and then consuming a candy bar and some salt on May 5th. The food appears to have been carefully hidden in his bathroom, and it's not yet clear how it got there. The major Palestinian leader is serving 5 life terms plus 40 years behind bars for the murder and attempted murder of Israeli civilians and soldiers. Israeli officials believe he called the hunger strike in a challenge to his political rival, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Many Palestinians outside the jail are demonstrating in solidarity by rioting or also refusing to eat, including Leila Khaled. She belongs to the radical PFLP terror group and gained notoriety in 1969 for becoming the first woman in history to hijack an airplane. Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan called Barghouti a murderer and a hypocrite, continuing, quote, "As I said from the very beginning, this hunger strike was never about the conditions of the convicted terrorists, which meet international standards. It is about advancing Marwan Barghouti's political ambitions to replace Abbas. Barghouti is a murderer and a hypocrite who urged his fellow prisoners to strike and suffer while he ate behind their back," end quote. A prison service spokesperson said that, quote, "The video speaks for itself." Grateful residents of Gaza are returning home from Egypt now after Cairo unexpectedly reopened the Rafah crossing yesterday. But any Palestinians hoping to travel in the other direction into Egypt are still being ordered to stay where they are. Hundreds have been streaming into Gaza after being stranded in the Arab Republic. Egyptian officials say the passage is being permitted for only 72 hours before the border slams shut again, and that started 2 days ago. The move's being undertaken as a humanitarian gesture to allow Palestinian students or sick people to return home after being stuck in Egypt or elsewhere. Cairo keeps its only crossing with Gaza closed most of the time because of strained relations with the Hamas rulers of the Strip and as part of efforts to keep the Islamist terrorists from obtaining weapons and other contraband. The last time Rafah was opened was just briefly in March and another time in February, but even then only one-way traffic was allowed. Gaza officials claim there are at least 20,000 Palestinians who qualify as humanitarian cases locked inside the Strip who desperately need to get out. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier is currently in the Holy Land for meetings with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. He started off in Jerusalem for talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Speculations are rising that the 4-day visit could be somewhat awkward, however, since the Israeli premier just canceled talks with Germany's foreign minister last month for having met with groups that criticize Israel's treatment of Palestinians. So far, though, there have been no signs of the rift, as the two leaders praised the strong relationship between their two states.
Equally, we have developed a great economic partnership. We're two advanced technological societies. We have much to gain by seizing the future together.
I think we are now in a status that our two countries are bound by deep friendship and by the common conviction that we should work for a common future. That is what we have to do. That is the sense why I'm here nearly every year. And thank you for your time today. We have, I think, some hours for an extended exchange, and we know that we have to discuss the situation in the whole region.
Steinmeier was later accompanied by his wife to the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Museum, where he laid a wreath and lit the eternal flame, in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered by Nazi Germany and its collaborators.
Fassbare Schuld haben wir Deutsche auf uns geladen. Hier an diesem Ort wird Erinnerung ganz Schmerz, Trauer und Scham. In Verantwortung für das, was geschehen ist, stehen wir fest an der Seite Israels und arbeiten für eine gemeinsame Zukunft.
Israeli President Reuven Rivlin also hosted his German counterpart for a round of talks.
אדוני הנשיא, ביקורך הנוכחי מצטרף לביקורם של שר החוץ גבריאל והנשיא לשעבר גאוק לפני כשבועיים. יחד, ביקורים אלה משמשים עדות לכך שדווקא מתוך העבר הטראומטי שלא יישכח לעולם, צמחה מערכת יחסים מכבדת ומיוחדת בין גרמניה לישראל.
The German leader then took time to address students at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, where he voiced his confidence in Israeli democracy.
Ich habe mich gefragt, was macht die israelische Demokratie eigentlich so stark und lebendig? Am Ende, wenn ich an meine inzwischen vielen Freundschaften mit Israelis denke, an die unzähligen durchwachten Nächte voller hitziger Debatten, dann liegt in meinen Augen der vitale Kern der israelischen Demokratie.
Steinmeier was really given the star treatment during his visit to the Israeli capital, as he was even escorted on a tour of the city's famous Machane Yehuda outdoor market by a very special tour guide, none other than Israeli President Rivlin himself. Now, when you think of limb transplants, your train of thought might turn to something out of a science fiction movie. Well, not anymore. One Israeli medical startup has found a way to transplant and even reattach severed limbs onto patients. And joining me today in the studio to tell us more about this medical marvel are Drs. Amira Rav and Eyal Gur. Thank you so much for joining me today. All right, so I guess my first question is, how exactly does this product work? Does this process work?
First, we have to define why do we do that at all. The idea is that today in the world there let's start with plastic surgery. Plastic surgery, microsurgery, is the art of reattaching small blood vessels and nerves under the microscope. And in the reconstructive plastic surgery, when people need or have deficient parts of the body, like faces or hands, we're trying to find solutions how to reconstruct those for functional and aesthetic reasons. Today, for large defects like people who do not have faces, for example, because of burn or other injury, or do not have limbs, the art is to attach or reconstruct with tissues that are taken from donors, dead brain donors, and those patients need some immunosuppression to have those limbs attached and then accepted by their body. Today, there's a main shortage of those organs, and the idea, can we have a bank of organs so when someone needs such an organ, we will be able to find out in an easy way and a fast way a replacement organ.
So you're trying to pull from this bank to avoid graft versus host.
Exactly. And there's another scenario, for example, at wartime or mass casualty injuries, where patients that had lost their limbs need to be resuscitated. They cannot have their limbs attached immediately because they're under risk. So if there's a way to freeze and then thaw their amputated limbs or organs, we could transfer those patients to a central hospital, and then after they've been resuscitated, we can reattach those frozen and then thawed limbs or organs back. So in order to do that, Dr. Amir Rav had worked on some kind of idea.
Yes, so I developed a technique, a freezing technique, called directional freezing, where you can control the ice morphology and the direction of the ice in a perfect way.
Now,
so
when you say the morphology and the direction of the ice, what do you mean by that?
So the ice has morphology,
right,
and you can control the size of the ice crystals, so it's actually the morphology of the ice crystals, and to make them not damage to the tissue. So you can do it only by thermodynamics principles, like the directional freezing.
Oh, wow.
So I developed this technique 25 years ago. And since then, we did many organs and tissue, including whole ovary. This was done with Professor Pasquale Patrizio in Yale, human whole ovary. And then we did whole liver transplantation in the pig. And we did also heart, and we did cartilage. So we did quite a lot of tissue and organs. But I think that the peak is right now the limb, because it's including everything, skin and muscles and bone and cartilage.
I mean,
together.
So was limb replacement always the end game as you were doing all of these other projects over the last 20 years?
Yes.
The idea is that the solid organs are very homogeneous in the tissue complex that they have within. But if you take a limb, it's a combination of skin and fat and muscle and fascia and nerves and blood vessels, and they all need to survive. And that is really hard. It was really hard to get or perform.
That was kind of my next question. What were some of the challenges, what were the greatest challenges you think you faced in the process from, start to finish, or from then to now, I guess we could say, because you're never really finished. But when, what were those major issues and how did you overcome them?
So the main issue is the different organs, the different tissue needs different protocols, and we found out that actually one protocol, which is a very, very slow cooling rate, that means the freezing process is very slow, is actually good for all the type of the tissue, and this is why it's make it works. And it's not very strange, and it's not science fiction because it exists in nature. There are many animals that freeze themselves during the winter, like frogs, like wood frog in Canada. They freeze themselves in the winter for several months, and they wake up in the spring.
It's amazing.
Yes. The other obstacle was reattaching those small organs, tiny organs, with truly using high magnification microscope and very small instruments and threads to reattach those back to the animal and actually see it flushing with new blood and surviving. In the past, the problem was that those tissue used to, necrose and die, and we were able to prove that those tissues are alive now through analysis of the histology and the survival of those tissue by high magnification microscopy. So, so this was achieved as well.
Incredible. What's one of your favorite success stories? Have you been operating on human subjects then for any time?
That's next. When, basic research in that fashion, we have to prove the concept by applying it to larger numbers of animals and then larger animals. And just then when we're ready with the right instrumentation and the right capability and the right indication and need, the first patient will be operated. So it will take some time.
All right, well, I hope to interview you again at that day. Yes. And thank you so much for coming in. This is amazing. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Now, this is really interesting. It's already been leaked that United States President Donald Trump reportedly wants to give a speech at Masada when he visits Israel for the first time in a few weeks. But what's even more surprising are claims he previously wanted to host a Miss Universe pageant high atop the historic fortress. An Israeli official says that back when Trump was a reality TV star and the owner of the contest in 2011, he wanted the women to strut the catwalk among the ruins of King Herod's desert palace. It didn't end up happening, but maybe now's his chance to finally make a huge appearance there. The ancient plateau has become deeply symbolic of the courage and endurance of the Jewish people. The last Jewish inhabitants were 960 men, women, and children who chose to take their own lives as free people in the year 73, rather than be slaves by the conquering Romans. Masada serves as a pinnacle of training for the modern Israeli army, and it's also become one of Israel's most respected tourist destinations. The Atlantic Monthly is speculating that Trump may have developed an affinity for Masada based on cultivating a portrayal of himself as an underdog against the United States political establishment, media, and liberal elites. The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Being a foreigner in another country can be an extremely eye-opening experience. There are a number of opportunities to learn about different types of food, culture, and traditions every single day. So our word of the day today is zar, meaning foreign. Zarim, or foreigners, are everywhere you look in practically every country. It really just depends on your perspective of what constitutes a zar, or foreign person, especially if you consider that the word zar shares a root with muzar, meaning strange or weird. So it should also not be a surprise that you could call somebody zar just because they're a stranger and not necessarily because they're maybe foreign. So next time you're feeling anxiety from being zar in a new place, remember to try to keep an open mind and experience all that country has to offer. You won't feel like a zar for long. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 69 or 21 degrees Celsius. And tomorrow you can expect clear skies with a rise in temperatures to a high of 99 or 36 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.60 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Thanks for watching.